He sent me a breakup text while I was teaching class, said he'd fallen in love with one of his students. After 15 years of marriage, Professor Ethan Walker decided to trade me in for youth. He thought I'd fall apart. But while he packed his bags, I was already setting the trap that would turn his new life into his worst nightmare. My name is Dr. Nora Bennett, and for 15 years, I lived what everyone called an admirable marriage. We were both professors at Harrington College, a small liberal arts university tucked between the coastal hills of Maine. He taught creative writing. I taught literature. He was charismatic, the kind of professor students adored. He could turn a lecture on metaphors into a spiritual experience. And me? I was the quiet one, organized, methodical, the professor who always stayed behind to help struggling students or edit the faculty journal after hours. We were a cliché in tweed, the academic power couple. At least, that's what everyone thought. It started small. Ethan began dressing differently. Tighter shirts, new cologne, a gym membership he never used before. He started saying things like, "You wouldn't understand, Nora." I'm trying to reconnect with my passion. At first I thought he meant his writing. He meant someone. Her name was Olivia Marks, one of his graduate students. 23, brilliant, beautiful, endlessly impressed by him. I noticed her long before the scandal broke, the way her essays always ended with, "Thank you for inspiring me, Professor." The way she lingered after class, glowing with that youthful admiration that men like Ethan feed on. Then one afternoon, between lectures, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "I'm leaving you, Nora. I can't keep pretending. I'm in love with someone else." That was it. 15 years of marriage reduced to one sentence. No conversation, no apology, just cowardice, neatly punctuated by betrayal. That night, he didn't come home. I sat alone in the house my parents had left me, edge of the water. A creaky, cedar-smelling Victorian on the air outside was foggy, thick with the smell of the ocean. Inside, the only sound was the clock ticking and my own heartbeat. I poured myself a glass of wine, looked out at the waves, and waited for the devastation to hit. But it didn't. Because deep down, I wasn't shocked. I'd seen it coming for months. It had started with a mentorship. Ethan had been meeting Olivia privately to help her develop her manuscript. Then came the creative retreats. Then the conferences that didn't appear on the university's calendar. I wasn't naive. I was observant. So 6 months earlier, I'd started saving everything. Receipts, emails, hotel invoices, Venmo transfers labeled my news. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I'd need them one day. And now that day had come. When I finally went upstairs, I noticed his things were gone. Closet, half empty. His side of the bed, neatly made. The only thing he'd left behind was a note on his desk. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I laughed out loud. That was Ethan, dramatic, self-serving, and utterly predictable. I picked up the note, folded it carefully, and placed it inside a folder labeled The Archive. Because I wasn't going to make it harder. I was going to make it permanent. The next morning, I walked into my office at the university like nothing had happened. Students smiled. Colleagues waved. Nobody knew that I was standing in the ashes of my marriage and already sketching the blueprint for revenge. That same afternoon, a mutual friend in the English department pulled me aside. "Have you seen Facebook?" she whispered. I hadn't. I opened it during lunch. There they were, Ethan and Olivia, at a cabin in Vermont, arms around each other, smiling under the caption, "New chapters begin when you stop pretending." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. I scrolled silently. Every photo, every comment, I saved it, screenshotted, archived, because Ethan had just made his biggest mistake. He made his betrayal public. And that meant I could make the consequences public too, legally, quietly, and efficiently. When the college dean, Dr. Harper, called me later that week to check in, her tone was cautious. "Listen, Nora," she said, "you should know the administration's been hearing rumors about Ethan and a student. If anything surfaces, we'll have to act." I pretended to hesitate. "Oh, really? That's concerning." Then, in the softest voice possible, I said, "Would it help if I sent you something I came across?" Her pause was long and deliberate. "Yes," she said finally, "it would." I hit send on an email containing 67 attachments, photos, receipts, text logs. That night, while Ethan and Olivia were posting pictures of their creative weekend getaway, the university's ethics committee was already drafting a misconduct investigation notice. That evening, I walked through the house again, the one he'd always wanted to refinance in both our names. He used to say, "It's just safer, honey. You never know what could happen." Oh, I knew. It was already fully paid off, titled to me alone. And he was about to find out just how unsafe betrayal could get. I sat on the porch as the sun went down, wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping my wine, and thought about the irony. Ethan had always loved to quote literature. His favorite line used to be from Shakespeare, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." I smiled into the wind and whispered, he always did have a talent for foreshadowing. He thought walking away was freedom. What he didn't realize was that he just walked straight into a scandal, one I had already written for him. The first real sign that my plan was working came 3 days later. The college grapevine, that unstoppable academic rumor mill, had officially done its job. Students whispered in hallways, faculty members avoided eye contact, and by Friday, a formal email from the ethics committee landed in Ethan's inbox, requesting immediate cooperation regarding an ongoing investigation. I know this because I still had access to our shared email dashboard, a habit of mine, one he never thought to change. When I read his frantic reply, "This must be a misunderstanding," I almost laughed. He'd spent years lecturing students about accountability, and now he was begging for leniency. Karma, it seemed, had an impeccable sense of timing. That evening, I was grading papers in my office when my phone rang. "Ethan." I let it ring twice before answering. His voice came out tight, sharp. "Nora, what the hell did you do?" "Hello to you too," I said, calm as the ocean outside my window. "The dean called me. Someone sent her photos, receipts, emails." "Oh," I said softly. "Did she?" Silence. Then, lower, "You're trying to destroy me." "No, Ethan," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You did that when you started signing reimbursement forms for your mistress." He inhaled sharply. "You think you're so clever." "Not clever," I corrected. "Just thorough." He hung up, and that was the moment I knew I'd taken his balance from him. He wasn't in control anymore. Over the next week, his facade began to crumble. He stopped showing up for classes. Students started asking questions. Someone leaked the ethics investigation notice to a campus gossip page. Within 48 hours, the headline read, "Tenured professor accused of misconduct with student." The comment section was brutal, half of them ridiculing him, the other half speculating about Olivia. She deleted her social media that same day. And me? I stayed silent. Silence, I'd learned, was more powerful than outrage. It left space for his guilt to echo louder. But behind the calm exterior, I'll admit there were moments when the weight of it all pressed on me. Nights when I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the man I thought he'd been, the one who used to write poetry on napkins, who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen. Then I'd remember how easily he threw it all away for validation from someone barely old enough to rent a car, and the ache hardened into resolve again. The next confrontation came in person. I was leaving campus when I saw him waiting by my car, hair disheveled, eyes sunken, a half-desperate smile plastered on his face. "Nora, please," he said, stepping closer. Can we just talk like adults? I opened my car door. You're trespassing, Ethan. He laughed hollowly. God, you really are cold. No, I said quietly. I'm just finished pretending warmth for someone who never deserved it. He clenched his jaw. Do you know what this investigation means for me? For my career? Yes, I said. It means you finally get to experience the consequences of your choices. He slammed his hand against it. Was over and over and over again. And when we said Liz gave her the word in his life, he said, you always thought you were better than me. No, I said softly, meeting his gaze. You just never thought I was stronger than you. For a moment, the wind was the only sound between us, cold, slicing through the late autumn air. He stepped back, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. I got in the car and drove off without looking back. The following Monday, the college ethics board formally suspended him pending termination. His access card was deactivated. Campus security escorted him from his office. A faculty member recorded it on their phone. It hit Reddit the next morning under the title, "When Your Professor's Office Hours Get Permanently Closed." Within hours, it went viral. His arrogance had made him a local celebrity for years. Now, that same arrogance made him infamous. I thought that might be enough, losing his job, his reputation, his public identity. But Ethan wasn't done making mistakes, because when you take everything away from a narcissist, they don't self-reflect. They lash out. A week after his dismissal, he sent me an email. You'll regret this, Nora. You can't erase me. I made your career. Without me, you're nothing. I read it twice, then forwarded it straight to my lawyer, Vanessa. Her reply was short and lethal. Perfect. Retaliation threats will strengthen our case. Keep everything. And I did. Every bitter word, every attempt to rewrite history, every pathetic text where he tried to play victim, because I knew what was coming next, the divorce filing. And I wanted the judge to see exactly who Ethan Walker really was. But the most satisfying moment of all came not in court, but at the grocery store. I was standing in line with a basket of vegetables when I heard two undergrads whispering behind me. Did you hear about Professor Walker? One said. Yeah, apparently he got caught using school money for his side chick. They both snorted. He always acted like he was above everyone. Guess karma grades on a curve. I almost laughed. Karma might grade on a curve, but I graded on evidence. And I was just getting started. Later that night, while scrolling through my email, I saw something that made my breath catch, an invitation to apply for Ethan's vacated position as head of the creative writing department. Dean Harper's message was simple. Given your reputation for integrity and excellence, we'd be honored if you considered stepping into this role. Integrity and excellence. Two things Ethan never understood, and two things that would now define me. I replied within the hour, I accept. And just like that, his empty office was mine. When I moved in, I found a few of his old things still there. A broken fountain pen, a leather notebook, and a coffee mug that said, World's Best Mentor. I stared at it for a moment, then dropped it into the trash. As it shattered, I whispered under my breath, Correction, world's worst husband. By the end of that semester, Ethan had become a ghost. No one spoke his name. His research papers disappeared from course references. Even the students who once idolized him had turned their admiration into memes. And me? I was thriving, busier, sharper, calmer than ever. But even as peace settled in, I could feel it, the unfinished edge of revenge. He'd lost his job, his image, his control, but I wanted something more than his downfall. I wanted his recognition, the slow, dawning realization that the person he'd discarded was the one who had outsmarted him completely. And that part would come next. He'd lost his career and his reputation. But I wasn't finished. Because there's one thing a man like Ethan fears more than losing everything, and that's being forgotten entirely. After the suspension, Ethan vanished from campus. But absence doesn't make people forget, it makes them speculate. And rumors have a way of surviving longer than reputations. For weeks, the college community buzzed with fragments of gossip. Carol Willen-Vallis debts to a billion donor. He's fighting the board. He's suing the school. He's gone to rehab. Everyone had a theory. Only I knew the truth. Ethan wasn't rebuilding anything. He was unraveling. I knew because I still had quiet access to the joint P.O. box we once shared. Every few days, I'd find another letter from creditors or lawyers, unopened, addressed to him, but mailed to our house. His publisher had withdrawn his upcoming manuscript deal. The academic board had formally voted to revoke his tenure. And his university pension? Frozen, pending investigation. It was all falling apart exactly as I designed, but there was one final piece of unfinished business, the one he thought would secure his comeback. Before the scandal, Ethan had been working on a book, part memoir, part self-indulgent manifesto, called The Courage to Begin Again. He'd told everyone it was going to be his masterpiece. What no one knew was that he'd plagiarized parts of it from his own students' work, including Olivia's unpublished thesis. I'd seen the early drafts months ago, saved on our shared cloud drive. Back then, I'd told him the concept was weak. Now it was ammunition. I opened the files again. The evidence was obvious. Identical phrasing, same metaphors, entire paragraphs copied verbatim. If he ever tried to publish it, he wouldn't just look like a fraud, he'd be one. And I knew exactly how to make sure the world saw that. I started with a small Act 1 that seemed insignificant, but would start a chain reaction. I printed a few pages of his manuscript and sent them anonymously to The Beacon, a campus literary magazine. Alongside them, I included copies of Olivia's original thesis excerpts. The submission email read, "An interesting example of authorship overlap. Thought you might find it educational." The editor was a former student of mine, sharp, fair, allergic to plagiarism. Within a week, she'd posted an article titled, "When Professors Steal, a Case Study in Academic Ethics." She didn't use his name, but the quotes were unmistakable. Everyone who read it knew exactly who it was about. Ethan tried to contact her to demand a retraction. She ignored him. The piece went viral in academic circles. And just like that, his last chance at redemption disintegrated in real time. Then came the phone call that truly sealed it. A journalist from the Chronicle of Higher Education reached out to me. "We're writing an expose on academic misconduct," she said. "You were married to Professor Walker, correct?" I hesitated for effect. "Yes," I said quietly, "but I'd rather not comment." Which, of course, was the best kind of comment, because the next article quoted an anonymous source close to the case, describing Ethan as a man consumed by his own ego. And just like that, the public narrative was complete. He was the cautionary tale. I was the quiet survivor. Still, there was something missing, something more personal. Ethan had always loved control. He controlled how we appeared to others, how stories were told, how truth was framed. I wanted to take that away from him completely. So I waited until the university made their final ruling, permanent termination, revocation of tenure, and referral to the accreditation board for professional misconduct. Then I reached out to Olivia. I didn't want to hurt her, not anymore. By now, she'd been chewed up and spat out by his world just like I once was. When she showed up at my office, she looked exhausted, pale, shaking, carrying a single folder. "I heard they fired him," she said softly. "They did," I replied. She hesitated. "I think you should see this." She handed me the folder. Inside were pages of Ethan's book, early drafts she'd edited for him, covered in her notes. "I found my own writing in there," she whispered. "Whole paragraphs." I looked up at her. You're not the first person he's stolen from, I said, but you might be the one who helps finish this. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of realization dawning. I don't want revenge, she murmured. I just want to move on. I nodded. Then let's make sure you can. The next day, I contacted my attorney again. We drafted a brief statement and submitted it to the publisher Ethan had approached under a pseudonym. It included the documented evidence of plagiarism, complete with timestamps from the shared drive. The publisher responded within 48 hours. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. The author's submission has been withdrawn permanently. In the same week, Olivia received an email from the university's ethics board. They were expunging her suspension record and offering her a research assistant position. Justice, quiet and thorough. When Ethan found out, he went ballistic. I heard from mutual colleagues that he'd shown up on campus demanding to speak to the dean, claiming he was a victim of bias. Security escorted him out. He was banned from campus grounds, and for the first time, he understood what exile really felt like. That weekend, he called me one last time. Voicemail, of course. You think you've won, Nora. You think this makes you powerful, but you've destroyed both of us. I listened to it twice, then saved it in my archive folder, the one where I kept every piece of his downfall like trophies. Destroyed both of us? No. He had destroyed himself. I had simply illuminated the wreckage. That night, as I sat by the window watching the first snow of winter fall across the water, I realized something unexpected. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't living inside his story. I was writing my own again. But there was still one final chapter to go, the moment that would turn quiet vindication into public legacy, and I knew exactly how to end it. He'd lost his job, his lover, his reputation, and his future. But there was one thing left to take the narrative itself, and I was about to rewrite it permanently. Winter in Maine has a way of making everything quiet. Even the sea, usually restless and loud, seemed to hush itself that December. The world outside my house was buried under soft, unbroken snow, and for the first time in years, my life matched the landscape. Still, peaceful, untouched by chaos. But peace doesn't mean the story's over. Not yet. Because I wasn't finished with Ethan Walker, not until I took from him the only thing he still clung to, his illusion of control over the story. It began with an invitation. The college was hosting its annual winter symposium, the same event where Ethan and I had given our first joint lecture a decade ago. This year, the theme was resilience and reinvention in modern academia. The irony was too beautiful to ignore. Dean Harper called me personally. Nora, you've become something of a symbol for professionalism under pressure. We'd love for you to give the keynote. I smiled into the phone. I'd be honored. The night of the event, the hall was packed. Professors, students, alumni, journalists. I stood backstage, adjusting the microphone on my lapel, breathing slowly. It wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. Because I knew Ethan would be watching, even if not in person, somewhere online, streaming, seething, clinging to whatever scraps of self-importance he had left. I stepped onto the stage. The applause faded, the lights dimmed, and then I spoke. When we talk about resilience, we often think it means surviving hardship. But real resilience, I began, voice steady, is not just surviving the storm, it's learning to build something new from the wreckage it leaves behind. I once believed integrity and talent were enough to protect a person from betrayal. They're not. But they are enough to rebuild after it. I let my eyes sweep the room, students leaning forward, professors nodding. And to anyone here who's ever been underestimated, remember this. When someone tries to erase you, let that be your cue to write yourself back in bold, permanent ink. The audience went silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, charged with recognition. I didn't need to name him. Everyone already knew. When the applause came, it wasn't just polite, it was thunderous. The next morning, I woke to find my inbox flooded. Messages from students, faculty, even national education journals wanting to feature my talk. But one message stood out. No subject line, no name, just a single sentence. You turned me into a ghost. I stared at the words, recognizing the email address instantly. Ethan's old university account, still active somewhere in digital limbo. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I typed my reply. No, Ethan, you did that when you set yourself on fire and called it passion. And I hit send. A week later, the article dropped. The Chronicle of Higher Education published a feature titled, Dr. Nora Bennett, Rewriting the Narrative of Power in Academia. The subheading read, After surviving public betrayal, one professor redefines resilience and quietly dismantles the man who tried to erase her. They didn't use his name. They didn't need to. The piece went viral, shared, quoted, debated across campuses nationwide. My inbox overflowed with speaking invitations, book deals, podcast requests. Meanwhile, Ethan disappeared completely. No forwarding address. No public response. The man who once built his life around being seen had become invisible. Months passed. Spring returned, soft light, melting snow, new growth. One afternoon, I stopped by campus to visit the garden behind the humanities building, the one Ethan and I had helped plant years ago. It was filled with daffodils now, bright and unapologetically alive. Dean Harper joined me there, smiling. You know, she said, we're naming the new writing scholarship after you. The Bennett Fellowship for Ethical Scholarship. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I smiled. That means more than you know. Because somewhere deep down, I knew I hadn't just won. I'd rewritten the ending. That night, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in months. The one labeled the archive. Inside were all the artifacts of my revenge, emails, receipts, his letters, proof of everything that had happened. One by one, I fed them into the fireplace, watched the paper curl and blacken, turning every lie into dust. When I was done, I sat back and whispered into the quiet, it's over. For the first time, I actually believed it. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived, no return address, just my name in his handwriting. Inside, a single photograph, the two of us at a faculty party years ago, smiling like we hadn't already started falling apart. On the back, a note. You were right. I never deserved you. I looked at it for a moment, no anger, no nostalgia, just completion. I tore it neatly down the middle and dropped it into the trash. Because forgiveness wasn't the point, freedom was. Now, a year later, when people ask me about that time, I don't tell them it was the story of a broken marriage. I tell them it was the story of a woman learning how to build again, stronger, smarter, quieter. I still teach at the same college. My students know me as Professor Bennett, not his ex-wife. Just me. Sometimes I still get messages from women who've been through something similar. They always ask the same question. How did you get even? And I tell them the truth. I didn't get even. I got better. Revenge isn't always loud. It isn't shouting or destruction or even anger. Sometimes it's the calm voice that says, I'm done playing by your rules. It's choosing silence over explanation. It's choosing success over closure. Ethan's mistake was thinking betrayal would make him powerful. Mine was thinking love made me weak. Turns out, we were both wrong. Because in the end, I didn't just survive him. I outlived the version of myself that ever needed him. And that's the most perfect revenge of all. If this story moved you, remember, you don't need rage to win. You just need patience, proof, and peace. Hit like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more true-to-life revenge stories where the truth always gets the last word.